Welcome to today's video session, Talking to Your Future Child. Thanks to our attendees for joining us, and we encourage you to share your views and continue the conversation in the chat section of this webinar, which you can find at the bottom of your screen, as well as on Twitter and other social media platforms using the hashtags MyFertility and FutureChildChat. You can go to fertilityplanet.com at any time to find out information on our speakers today and to book appointments with either of them. We love to hear from you guys, so make sure to visit. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to Nancy Mae, creator of the Energetic Fertility Method, and to Mary Goyer, holistic fertility expert. While Fertility Planet is being compensated for this video session, all of our opinions expressed are our own. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to Nancy and Mary and welcome them to the conversation. Welcome to both of you, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having us.
So let's get things started off by kind of just going over what we're talking about today. So today we're going to talk about speaking with your baby and communicating with them before they're actually conceived, which is an interesting concept and something that our viewers likely aren't very familiar with. So I was wondering, Nancy, if you would be able to elaborate on that for us.
So the energy of your future child is out there somewhere, and it's really a matter of learning how to connect with that and being open to communicating with your future child. We're all energy, our physical bodies, our thoughts, our beliefs, other people's thoughts, and everything around us. And yes, it might be strange to think that everything's energy, but really when you get down to it, that's what we are. And so communicating with your future child is really about connecting with their energy.
And I know, Mary, that you also practice preconception communication in your practice as well. And I'm wondering if you can kind of elaborate on what Nancy was saying and how the practices that you do might be similar or different from how she interacts with preconceived babies.
Yeah, well, you know, it sounds pretty similar. Nancy and I were happy to see that before we knew each other, we really came to very similar processes, completely separate of each other. You know, and for me, you know, I work with people in 3-month kind of blocks of time typically, and we're always weaving in processes around communication, and it's all about intuition in general and the ability to kind of tune in to some of those subtle messages that maybe for people listening right now have already started to come in, but you know, there's just something about, you know, like turning the radar down a little bit so that you can pick up on some of those more sensitive, subtle things that are coming your way, and yeah, like in terms of, you know, having a direct focus of tapping in specifically to the idea of this baby that we're welcoming in, that we want to invite in, can be very, very powerful to have something that you're really like directing your attention towards.
That's very interesting. So we're talking about energy in the sense of like a creative force that is sort of within all of us and running through everything. And I know, Nancy, you call your method the Energetic Fertility Method. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit for us on how that works.
I'll tell you a little bit of how the Energetic Fertility Method is set up and how it can be helpful for people who are interested in getting pregnant. So the Energetic Fertility Method is a multi-session process that helps to balance and align your energetic systems to create an optimal environment for conception to occur. And many times things happen that cause energy to get stuck or stagnant, or even leave some sort of residue, and this can make it challenging to become pregnant. So some things that I see often in my practice that can impede energy include unresolved grief and trauma from a past miscarriage, childhood trauma, or loss of a loved one. And maybe it's even around fears about getting pregnant or being a parent and the responsibilities that go along with that, including fiscal responsibilities. And sometimes it's really our own or other people's expectations, judgments, and frustrations that can get in the way. And all these things take up energetic space. And in order for, like if you imagine a dam and it's closed, and nothing can flow. If you're trying to get pregnant and nothing can flow, it's going to make it more challenging. If you can lift that dam a little bit and get the energy to flow at least somewhat, the energy is going to keep going and you're going to have a better chance of getting pregnant. So EFM teaches you simple energetic tools of how to create a flow in the energy, and this also includes talking with your future child. So we look at 4 levels in EFM. One is the physical level, which maybe you'd look at the reproductive system and the endocrine system and look at those from an energetic perspective. You also look at the emotional level, which may be looking at childhood trauma or a past miscarriage. And then we look at the mental level, and maybe that's looking at judgments or expectations that you've had around this or that doctors have had, like you should be pregnant right now, I don't know what's going on, or those sorts of things we definitely address as well, because that's energy. And if that's stuck in you somewhere, it's going to make it more challenging to get pregnant. And then the last aspect is the spiritual aspect. And in our culture, we tend to be very intellectual, and that tends to be valued. And so that can block our ability to connect on a spiritual realm. Also, some people have had negative experiences growing up in religion, and that can also hamper their ability to connect with the spiritual realm. So this gives you a little bit of an idea of what the energetic fertility method is all about, and again, included in this is connecting with your future child, and that's a big aspect of this because so much of it is about connection.
So I know that you talked a little bit about clearing trauma and removing negative energy blocks and being able to connect to your future child and your fertility on a more spiritual level, which I think is something that's so important in our culture to kind of be able to open yourself up to those experiences again. But I'm wondering if there are any specific types of thought processes that people can do that would help you to be open to these kinds of things. Are there special practices that they can do at home to make them more receptive? This question is for both Nancy and Mary.
Well, if we just focus on the topic for today of connecting with your future child and communicating with your future child, some things that I would suggest or ask people is, have you ever done a vision board? You know, either at work or at home? Or did you ever write a letter to your spouse before you met them? Did you ever have visualizations or imagery around what you thought your life would be like with your spouse or what your spouse would be like? Those sorts of things, you're really putting yourself out there. You're creating clarity. And that's a similar concept with connecting with your future child. You want to, you can create a vision board for your future child. You can do lots of sorts of things like that. So I'll let Mary say a few things as well. Go ahead, Mary.
No, I appreciate that starting point because it's really about tapping into what most people would just think of as a normal creative process. If you're going to, for example, write, there's a certain kind of space that you try to get in where it's interesting. You're actually in a certain way trying to disengage the mind chatter enough that you can kind of just tap in and let the creative process flow. I used to be an English teacher, and so I think about like all the pre-writing activities I would have, students do in order to find that thing that wants to be expressed. And in fact, I like to encourage people to journal, to just kind of get into that space where you're not thinking so hard, and you get. Sometimes we can, Nancy alluded to this earlier, we're so about our thoughts in this culture, and many of us just kind of live in our heads for so much of the day that the biggest issue can sometimes be just finding a way to sort of like relax out of that like heady space so that you can begin to just see what really comes to you. So other thought processes, just along those lines are just, to kind of cultivate sort of like I'm open, I'm willing, like let's give this a try. Clearing that mind chatter. So many of my clients are very smart and grounded and well educated, and so for them it's just about like kind of turning off this certain thing that they're doing most of their day so that they can go, you know, like inward and begin to find, you know, that creative process. So having a vision board or a letter or something like that, that can be a very helpful practice to give just a little bit of structure, but to get people kind of out of that thinking.
I love that you guys are talking about things like vision boards and journaling and really bringing the idea back to creative processes that we use day to day and that a lot of people will do. Because I think that the idea of communicating with your child before they're conceived can sound a little bit different and non-mainstream and might put people off of it. But I think that it's really just calling it something different when it's something that we all do all the time, every day. We oftentimes put out energy and intention for things that we really want to attract into our lives, and nobody would say that that is a stretch. And so to just sort of expand that into the realm of your fertility and welcoming a child into your home, I think is a beautiful idea.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time talking about intuition in our culture, you know, the sixth sense, gut reactions, you know, these are all ideas that we're very familiar with, and we don't spend a lot of time cultivating them necessarily. Intuition is not necessarily revered in our culture the way thoughts are, but that's also true of emotions, and they're not really cultivated either, very much so. But we all understand that this is a part of who we are, and as women, this is part of our natural capacity.
Fantastic. I absolutely agree with that. I guess if we're talking now about communicating with your future child, it's interesting for other people who are watching to know what kinds of things might a future child want to say to a couple who is, you know, trying to conceive. What are the things that they might want to bring up or have communication with you about?
There are so many different things that a future child may want to communicate. I mean, there are so many that we couldn't list them here right now, but to give you an example, they may have something important for you to know about them. Maybe they need a certain environment in order to be able to come in. Maybe they want a sibling to come in as well. Maybe they just really want to connect with you. And I see this all the time. It's so much about the connection. The baby really wants to know that you love them, that there's room for them, and that this is the right time. When I work with families who are, say they're so busy that they don't have the time to communicate with their child beforehand, that's sending a message to the child. So it's really about you know, checking in and making sure that the child knows that this is the right time, that there is space, and that they love them. You know, some other things that a baby might really be interested in communicating is about the timing. Like I said earlier, maybe it's not this month. Maybe they need to come in the spring for whatever reason. Maybe they need a home with a certain amount of income. Again, it might sound strange, but there are these sorts of feelings and sensations and intuitive hits do come in from these babies. Mary, I'm sure you see this in your practice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I'll just add to that, you know, because there are sometimes very concrete messages that come through. And it's funny because once women get used to this process of this preconception communication, sometimes they'll tell me, actually, this message has been coming to me for a long time. I just, you know, either didn't trust it or I don't know, it was just so in the background that, you know, I didn't necessarily emphasize it. But it could be something like, I need to make a food shift. You know, I had a client who told me that she just really felt clear that she needed to start eating chicken. It was very specific. You know, I need to start eating chicken. She was a vegetarian, I'm pretty sure. And she started doing that, and there were a number of other things that kind of followed up with this. It wasn't just like this message happened and then she attributed everything to that clarity. But oftentimes if there is a food shift or you need to start doing something more or something else less, that will come through. Internal healing work. If you keep noticing that there's some heaviness around some particular trauma or point of grief, like Nancy was talking about with her method, that's something that the spirit baby might let you know is really important to take care of. You know, get this house cleaning done ahead of time. It can be that there's something about your partnership that's out of sync, and you may be feeling some heaviness every time you tap into that. And if you're getting that hit, you know, definitely follow up on that. That's something, you know, that harmonization is important. And what can also happen, I just want to put this in the mix, is sometimes that communication can come through that something along the lines of, don't worry, you're on the right track. We're just, you know, there's a timing thing here at play, like Nancy said, but you're on track. And I just love it when women are able to tap into that and the peace that they are able to experience when it really feels true, not just sort of like this idea that they sort of are kind of grasping at and hoping for, but it like actually really feels genuine. That's gold, you know, as you can imagine, right?
One thing that came to me as you were speaking is it reminded me, you were talking about the heaviness, and that could be a signal for the parent to do some work. Heaviness can also come with a child. And so the child could also be communicating to you that they're going to bring in some heaviness, and are you going to be able to be okay with that? That actually happened to me with one of my daughters, or one of my future children, when I was trying to conceive. And I knew there were going to be a lot of things that this particular child needed some support with. So there's, again, there's so many things. We could go on for probably a couple hours with the different things that a child wants to communicate to you.
I think that that's a really good point, is that there's so many things that we can talk about with, I mean, every child is going to be different and every couple is going to be different, and the different needs that go between them as a unit, a family unit that's trying to grow, can be kind of exponential. We're going to move to a little bit of our questions from our online audience. So I'm going to just take a second here to see what kinds of questions we've got. I know that a lot of our people that are viewing are going through infertility right now. I'm wondering if your method of communicating with future babies is something that can help them through their infertility process emotionally or physically or anything like that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, in terms of nuts and bolts, you know, when you find out information that gives you a sense of something that you need to do, you know, like so many people that come to me are just looking for, like, what needs to happen? What's the doing? What part of the plan needs to be tweaked? You know, and when they do get very concrete information, that can feel really empowering. Like, okay, now I know, you know, now I know what's in front of me and what's left. You know, and then on the flip side, you know, and this is something that really connects in with the spiritual level that we sort of alluded to, and Nancy talked about in her method, is the being, you know, and when you can tap in and start to find that there's a certain level of, you know, of peace and trust coming in, it helps you to be more positive. And all of this, of course, like, increases the chances of conception. And not just conception, but the chances of a healthy full-term, you know, pregnancy, which is, of course, you know, like, to be able to support that, you know, like that, this so powerful.
I think that that's amazing that you were talking about the spirituality aspect of it. I have a question here from Sarah by email, wanting to know if this is something that she can practice as a Christian. And I guess I'll just broaden that a little bit and ask if this is something that you can practice no matter what religion you are, or if you're an atheist, or if there's any limitation to that.
I would say it's really about your intention. And if you go into your heart and feel that the intention is to connect with your future child, and it feels real and authentic, then absolutely. If there's a doubt, it's going to make it more challenging for you to connect with your future child. So I think there are no boundaries unless you create them yourself.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, I feel like you know, the different kinds of mystical threads that run through many different spiritual paths all leave lots of room. But you know, in essence, whether it's Christianity or whether it's some other form of tapping into the sacred. It's all about connection. Which is at the heart of what we're talking about today. Learning how to connect, learning how to permeate those levels of anxiety or trauma, or those things that kind of create static and make it hard to hear. However you conceive of as the divine or the sacred, or just your true self even. It works. I have found that that these types of processes work for people that even consider themselves agnostic or atheist, but they believe that there is a way to tune in to a certain level of quiet and subtle information. It's really universal in that way.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We're having another question from Anonymous through email. Hello, Anonymous. They're wanting to know, what do they do if their partner doesn't feel like taking part in this with them? Will that be something that will block the baby from coming through if the partner isn't fully on board with the process?
It really, I see this all the time, because I typically work with the women, and they tell me when they have a male partner that the partner is not necessarily as interested in communicating with the child beforehand. And, if there is a way to get your partner involved on some level, I do think it's helpful. For instance, if you write a letter or even communicate with your partner, what do you think our baby's going to be like? That in and of itself is a way for your partner to connect with the baby without even really knowing it. Hopefully that makes some sense. But I do all the time work with women who are the ones who will connect with the baby most.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there are lots of different ways to make this general idea accessible to different types, and there are some cases in which it can be indicative of a more systemic issue or problem in the partnership. If there are lots of ways in which you're noticing that there's something kind of out of sync between you and your partner, that may be something that is a place for you to get some support. But yeah, I agree with Nancy that it's typically the women are much more, we are designed to be more connected to our intuition in a certain way, and so for women a lot of times this more automatically makes sense from the get-go.
I have one more question, the last one that we have time for, coming in from Taylor via email. She's asking, what if your baby doesn't seem to be around you? What if you don't feel like you're connecting with your baby? How do you know that it's working?
That is a fabulous question. It really is, as Mary alluded to earlier, it's about finding a little quiet place inside of you. And the more you're able to do that, the easier it is to connect with your baby. The more that you have the positive intention, you can, the easier it is to feel the baby around you. Sometimes the signs or symbols that the baby give you are going to be very different than what your mind might think. The baby may talk to you in words. You may bring pictures. You may see an image on a bus, and then you see the same image on a billboard. Maybe it's a butterfly. Maybe it's a song. Maybe it's, all of a sudden you feel something brushing against your skin. You're like, wait, no, there was nothing. And then your mind comes in. So I invite you to, if you ever get like a sense of, okay, something just happened, was that my baby? Before you go to the mind, because once you get to the mind's going to oftentimes say, no, that couldn't have been a sign from my child. So those are some of the things that I actually do see in my practice. People are wondering, is there a baby around me? And how do I know if there is a baby? So that's what I like to talk with them about. What about you, Mary?
Yeah, those are some great examples, and and I'll just kind of affirm that for most people that I work with, there are those doubts, like that's in fact I think the biggest bump around this process is that, you know, we just haven't been trained in this stuff since we were little kids the way we have been writing and arithmetic and, you know, cultivating our mind. And so people have these questions like, well, this, you know, and the first couple of times you try it, it may feel like I don't know, this is new ground, I don't feel sure. And so my suggestion is to look for the evidence that it's working and just kind of continue to be in the space of openness and keep practicing it. And if you're willing to kind of stick with it, you'll get to that place where you can easily discern between I'm not connecting, there's something that's, you know, like that's the message, versus, oh, I just wasn't sure, you know, how to pick up on these subtle communications.
Thank you both so much. We're going to wrap up the question segment now, and in closing, there are 3 main points that our experts, Nancy and Mary, would like you to take away with you. Number 1 is that anyone can communicate with their future child. As long as you're keeping lines of communication open and utilizing your intuition, that is available for everyone. Number 2, that talking with your future child can increase your odds of bringing a child into your life, whether through pregnancy or adoption or fostering. By keeping you in an open mindset for that transition, it can hasten that development, whereas keeping yourself blocked off to those can slow it down. And number 3, there are a few simple ways you can connect with your child. Like you can write a letter to them. You can intend to connect in your dream times. Think about them as you're falling asleep. You can also invite them to come and play with you or sit on a park bench. You can sing lullabies. All of these things that will let any future child that's around you understand that you really do want to welcome them into your life. I wanted to thank Nancy Mae and Mary for spending time with us, and to our audience for sharing your experiences with us. You can learn more about all of these speakers and our sponsors and book appointments with them by going to fertilityplanit.com, and you can watch the video recording of this live session and all video sessions that have been produced by Fertility Planit on the website for free. So go to www.fertilityplanit.com to access those. Thanks again to our audience for joining us, and please continue to share your views and the conversation with us in the group discussions or on Twitter using the hashtag #MyFertility and FutureChildChat. We love hearing from you, so please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks again so much for watching, and have a great day.